In today's show, it's a mailbag episode answering listener-submitted questions about the value of veterans, small guard lineups, and tag team wrestling duos. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen. Coming at you every single weekday, Monday through Friday. Make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same as Locked On Blazers, your team every day. Today's episode is a mailbag episode answering listener-submitted questions all episode long. To get submit a mailbag question, you send an email to lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. You can send an email whenever you're thinking of, but the best way to do it is to become a daily listener of the podcast or a very regular listener of the podcast. If you listen every day, you won't miss an episode by virtue of listening every day. But I will put out a call soliciting questions, respond, you'll hear it in the show, send me an email, and that's the best way to do it. But you can just send me an email whenever you're thinking of a question. I respond to, the majority of the emails I get, so that is the best place to reach me. Without further ado, though, let's get into the questions because we got some to get through today. This first one comes from Chase, who asks, I'm someone who is skeptical about Shaedon Sharpe getting big minutes at the three, that's small forward, partially due to the Blazers running players out of position in the past. I've been pining for Portland to have a true 6'8+ wing for what seems like forever. Can you make the case for Shaedon playing small forward in the near term? I can, Chase. And let me say, you are not the only person who is concerned about the sort of Blazers pivoting from a decade of having undersized guards, 7 or 8 years of having undersized guards, to another version of a team with undersized guards, to a third iteration of this team with undersized guards. This is assuming that Damian Lillard leaves. Scoot Henderson is not a small guard. He, according to Joe Cronin, measured 6'3.5" with his shoes on. He's almost 6'4". He's got good positional size. Anfernee Simons is not the prototypical two-guard. He's smaller than the average two-guard, which is about in the NBA across the league. And the league will release a new version of this at the beginning of the season, where they kind of have little stats on players across the league. But the average shooting guard last year in the league was about 6'5", and so smaller than that. What the real worry is with small guards is just being bad on defense. Scoot Henderson at least has the skills, or the skill set, I think is probably the actual word I want to use there. The skill set, the tools to be a good defender in the league. Pretty safe bet he'll be a bad defensive player in year one. Teenagers not very good on defense in the league. Typically, rookies are typically pretty bad on defense. But, moving forward, this is years, say 2 through 12. He has the physical tools to be a pretty darn good defender in the league. And I think he can get there. If he's good on defense, it mitigates some of the concerns about him playing next to Anfernee Simons. And to be clear, I think Scoot and Ant are going to start in the backcourt, and Shaedon, at least to begin the season, is going to come off the bench with Matisse Thybulle starting at the three. I think that's totally reasonable. Still plenty of room for Shaedon Sharpe to play 28 to 31 minutes a night. Totally fine. If he earns more minutes, he'll play more minutes. They're not going to be beholden to what they do at the beginning of the season. That's just my read on what they're going to do to start the year. But for Sharpe to find minutes because of because Anfernee Simons is going to play 35-ish. Scoot Henderson's going to play 33 plus, 35-ish, probably himself too, is that there are only so many minutes to be had at the two. So for Shaedon Sharpe to get up to 30 and 30 plus, if you're really rooting for it, which I think he should be, I think Shaedon Sharpe should play 30 plus minutes on this iteration of the Blazers. That's very normal. He's going to have to play some small forward. So the case for him playing small forward is that you want to see if he can do it. It's not that he's going to be really good, but he has the size to eventually be that wing. Like he's not going to be a plus 6'8 plus wing or even like a taller than average small forward in the NBA, but he's 6'6". He showed some real, he got a lot stronger as the season went on. Whether he got like actually stronger or just learned how to play stronger, I think those are two different things in the league. I think mostly Shaedon Sharpe learned how to play stronger. And also obviously like he's 20 years old, like he's going to physically mature a little bit. So you can pretty much count on him filling out in some form or fashion. Not everyone bulks up and adds 25 pounds, but if you go look back, like just say like rookie year Damian Lillard to year 7 Damian Lillard, it's wild how much bigger and broader he got just by virtue of growing up from being 21 to 28. It is, and you know, NBA lifting and NBA dieting and all that stuff. So I think the case for Shaedon Sharpe playing small forward is that you want to figure out if he can do it, because he has the at least like frame to think that he could. And if he can, it does solve one of your big problems, because if he can guard threes and positions in the league is more about who you can guard. What you do on the other end, it's like roles. Like think about someone like Luka Doncic. On offense, Luka is like pretty clearly the point guard. On defense, he's never guarded a point guard in his life. He's like a 3 on defense, but he's pretty clearly a guard on offense, right? Like, so roles, the positions are less meaningful than roles. I'm talking about Shaedon Sharpe playing like a true 3 role on both ends, where he's a wing off-ball-y guy on offense and like guards threes on defense. I think you want to find out if he can do it this year, find out how close he is to getting there, find out where he needs to improve. And in the near term, there is no real downside to him being incapable of it. The Blazers are not going to be competing for a playoff spot. And quite frankly, when your best like prospects are a 19-year-old point guard and a 20-year-old 2 in Shaedon Sharpe, like you don't need to be good right now. You don't need to be. You need to be good in years 2 and 3 of this experiment, particularly year 3 of this experiment. You want to be like legitimately good. The last year of Shaedon Sharpe's rookie deal, you want to be like legitimately, okay, this is a playoff team level good. You want to get there over the next 2 seasons. But this year they don't need to be competitive. It's fine if they're bad. But like you want to find out, you want to just see what you got with Shaedon Sharpe. You want to see what you got. And because of the roster is what it is, like Anthony Simons is on the team still, and I think there's no reason. You got to kind of figure out what the deal is with Dame before you punt on the 24-year-old 2 guard behind, like in Anthony Simons. Like you kind of got to. You got to knock down the biggest bowling pin. That's not how bowling works, but you got to knock down some dominoes, and Ant is not the first domino to fall here. He might have been at one point. He no longer is, and I think you owe it to this team to kind of figure out what it looks like. Anthony Simons is like straight up just like he's better than Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe for now. You don't punt on that. There's no reason to punt for, like, you don't need to like rush to make sure that Scoot and Shaedon is the backcourt of the future. You want to build to that, but if you don't have to because Shaedon Sharpe proves that he can play small forward, then you're going to just be in better shape. And this year is about figuring out what he can do. The case for him doing it is to find out if it's real. I think there is some belief that he can be that, but you kind of just want to use this year to experiment and have him guard bigger players, have him guard big wings, and see what he can do. He's not going to get every big assignment on defense. You have Matisse Thybulle, you have Jeremy Grant for those spots. Like, he doesn't have to do it, but you have some sort of wiggle room here to struggle and experiment, and the Blazers owe it to themselves to find out whether Shaedon Sharpe can play the 3, because if he can't, then you do need to make some decisions on what you do with Anthony Simons. If he can, you need to make less decisions, and you have more talent that fits, and finding out what fits is kind of the name of the game for this entire season. That's the short-term case. The long-term case is that I agree with you, and I think Shaedon Sharpe's a 2, and that they'll have to figure it out, but they absolutely do not need to figure it out this year. They absolutely do not need to trade Anthony Simons at the trade deadline. There's just no rush. Like, there's no rush to do that. I think we as like sort of the watching collective, we get ahead of ourselves with just like, okay, they got to clean it up. They got to make all these roster decisions because Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe are the future. I think what the Blazers owe it to themselves this year is to find out whether that's true or not, and then make decisions accordingly moving forward. You have set yourself up with the luxury of being patient. So go ahead and be patient. That would be my advice. Okay, second segment, more questions. Went long on that one because I think it speaks to sort of the nature of the Blazers' next steps. But got more questions in the mailbag that I will fish out and answer in the second segment. Join me there. First, let me tell you about FanDuel. Why don't you take your first swing at betting on MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200? That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to over-under to who you think's going to hit the first home run to Yerfies to Nerfies, whatever you're into in the world of MLB betting, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly with safe and fast withdrawals. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right. We got more mailbag questions for you. This next one comes from listener Joseph, who asks, in a Summer League interview, Chauncey Billups said, quote, "I can't raise these kids alone." How much do you buy into the idea that teams should never go all young because they need a basic level of skill to grow effectively? For example, if you don't have a good table setter, your awesome rookie wing won't look great because he has no one to set him up. So I believe the skill set matters stuff. Like I think in some ways you just want someone to, you want some level of competence to kind of keep the roof on, right? So the thing doesn't blow off and every night you're just like you're sitting in the rain. You want some level of competence from veterans. I think I will say this. Last year, Chauncey Billups was very complimentary of Jeremy Grant's leadership kind of behind the scenes. He said dudes love him, like they really love him and they gravitate towards him. And I will say, I don't know that I got that vibe from Jeremy watching him, but I wasn't that close to the team. I wasn't in the locker room that often. I had my first child in November, and I didn't go to games very much. So I didn't see the sort of behind the scenes stuff that I've seen in past seasons. So I can't really speak to my feeling on that as closely as I can. I just got to trust Chauncey on this one. So there is some like Jeremy Grant, while to me he doesn't scream like this like loud vocal leader, if he does have some of those sort of leadership, guys gravitate towards him, dudes love him type of stuff, that helps because he can say like, okay, here's how you take care of yourself. Here's how you're ready to play. Jeremy Grant like hasn't played games after the All-Star break the last 2 years. So it's like, here's how you're available until like the middle of March and then you go sit down. No, I'm kidding, but for real, he hasn't played. Check the stats. Check the game logs. My man barely plays after the All-Star break. I think generally speaking, that has value. Like Jeremy Grant or whomever, but in the Blazers case, like Jeremy Grant, because the rest of their team is really young. Just like him showing guys the ropes. Here's how to be a pro. Like how to prepare, so how to take care of your body, how to eat right, how to like not go out to the club all night, or if you go out to the club, how to like regain what you need to regain, how to like be responsible on the back end, drink water or whatever to get yourself right. So you're capable of playing because like the season is it just grinds on you. It's just a grind and you gotta stick with it or you can lose a week pretty quickly. That's kind of how it works. There's value there, but I think what the actual value of veterans for me, not the actual value, but to me like the added value of veterans that I think is. This is like an old fuddy-duddy thought I'm going to share, but I'm going to risk it. And if you're like a Gen Z listener who thinks I'm an old fuddy-duddy, you're probably right. You're probably right. I do not think our society values institutional knowledge nearly enough as it once did. Old folks know stuff. People who've been around the game know what it's like to be around the game. And I'm not talking basketball. I'm talking life. I'm talking if you've ever worked any job and you worked with someone who's like been there for like 30 years. Okay, I'll share a story. I worked at this office once where this old guy he was probably like in his late 50s. He was not that old, but older than me at the time because I was in my 20s. He wrote on a typewriter. Not all, he wrote emails and stuff, but he would take notes. He had a little typewriter set up, and he wrote on a typewriter because he always had written on a typewriter. So he would make a call. He would take some notes on whatever he was working on. He was an architect, and then he would, from the call, and then he would transcribe what he'd written down onto a little note card. He'd put in the typewriter. It was insane. It's like a wild thing to do. But if he had a reference to something, it was always there, organized in a certain way. Now, that's like a really extreme example and kind of like a really OCD version of it. But what I'm talking about is just the institutional knowledge of people who've been around the block. They know people. They know people across whatever industry you're in. They'll know people across the industry. They've been there a while. They've earned respect. They know how the systems work. And understanding how the systems work has real value. And that's what vets bring to an NBA team, is that institutional knowledge. Oh yeah, this ref, you do not want to complain early. You can complain late once the gets going, but if you complain in the first quarter, you're going to get early tee, or like they're going to lose they're not going to give you calls, or hey, this is like coach is dogging on you for this type of thing. Here's a way that you can get what you want. Hey, you want to catch on the left block and go. He wants you to wait and like set these things up. Here's a way, here's a way that you can get both. Like here's a way you can do what coach wants you to do and still get into what you want to get into. Institutional knowledge matters. Like, why do you think DeAndre Jordan's still in the league? This stuff matters. I think, I will say that listener Joseph added this in the back half of the email, said like the Rockets are a pretty good example of this last year. No vets, and they were just a mess. You need the back half of the Blazers roster. Like, we'll see what happens, like just like with them filling out the roster. But I think it would be important to have add at least one more like true veteran presence, someone who's been in the league 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, who can just tell folks how it works. Because I think getting from, Chauncey Billups can say, like, I was the 3rd overall pick. I moved around a bunch early in my career, and then I finally kind of found my spot later in my career, and then I was really stinking good when I found my spot. But Chauncey Billups got traded in his rookie contract, right? Like, got traded as a rookie and, bounced around a lot early until he figured it out, and then he found a place where it really fit, and he can talk to them about that experience. But it is different player to player than coach to player. And the Blazers need that veteran experience. It'll be valuable for them to have it. Next question comes from Eric from Beaverton, who asks, every good rebuild needs a name or a slogan or catchphrase or what have you. Philly was trust the process. And when Kevin Pritchard was rebuilding the Blazers, the phrase that pays was let the cake bake. To get this rebuild firmly and truly underway, we need a slogan that will fill our hearts with hope. So if you don't remember, in like the winter of 2008, like early in the 2008-2009 season, Kevin Pritchard was, he had over in 2006, he drafted Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge. In 2007, he drafted Greg Oden. And then in that following year, so 07-08 is Oden's rookie year, did not participate. So in 2008, it's like, okay, is this team ready to like push their chips in or what might be? And Kevin Pritchard said he was comfortable like letting the cake bake. Like he was, he wasn't going to make a big splash move. He had the expiring contract of Rayful of France, I believe, like that he never got rid of. But that was a big thing in Blazerland back in 2008 was Rayful of France's expiring contract. But he was comfortable letting the thing organically bake together. I joked with some friends today when we were reminiscing about Bake the Cake that the cake did not bake well, collapsed in the middle. That thing fell in the oven. But it had real promise. It was a beautiful cake when you put it in the oven, for sure. So what is the Blazers slogan? I thought about a bunch of these, and I think realistically it is hard to know the slogan until we see what happens with the Dame trade. Because if this thing drags on, the slogan is like, ugh. But if there's some resolution and there's like another, depending on what the Blazers get back, I don't know that like Nikola Jovic is going to greatly change how we view this rebuild, but maybe he will. I would say like we'll have more clarity on what it looks like when we know what it looks like. I think now the Blazers are just kind of in limbo. But I thought about a bunch of ideas, but this is the one I came up with. Lead certified. I work in the architectural world, in the real estate world. I worked in architectural office briefly. I worked in the real estate world in my real life, and some of the buildings we work on are LEED certified. That means that they have achieved some level of sustainable construction or sustainable function in their building after they're built, like in the way that they process waste or what have you, to receive this LEED certification. It is a way to promote sustainable building practices in this sort of real estate and construction world. The Blazers famously got the Moda Center LEED certified, and there's levels of it. But I'm talking, that's LEED. I'm talking LEAD, LEED certified. It might read like lead, so that's probably maybe a bad slogan, but LEED certified, because the Blazers got to build this thing sustainably. Sustainable practices to build this thing up. I will say the Nuggets had a slogan that said, "We don't skip steps." And I hated it. It's so corny, because the best way to win a championship is to skip steps. That's the best way to do it. The best way to win a championship is absolutely to skip steps. The steps suck, and they're really hard to do. And teams don't win titles because they don't skip steps, because they let that cake bake. The Nuggets didn't skip steps. They lost a game 83 and didn't make the playoffs. And they made the playoffs. And in 2019, they lost a game 7 at home and didn't make the Western Conference Finals. The following year in 2020, they get to the Western Conference Finals. Then they had 2 years of injuries because of basically the timing of that Jamal Murray ACL tear. Just a real bummer. And when they were fully healthy and got back, you know what they did? They rolled through the playoffs and dominated. Basically the best team in the Western Conference all year long, and then rolled through the playoffs and won the title. They didn't skip steps. So I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. I still think it's corny. The best way to win championships is absolutely still to skip steps. Look at the friggin' Phoenix Suns. They're trying to skip every step imaginable. They might not win the title, but we'll see. So I'm sticking with LEED certified. LEED, LEAD, certified as the slogan for the rebuild. That's pretty bad. If you got a better one, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Okay, let's answer more questions to end the show. Join me in that third segment, won't you? Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked on Blazers. I was supposed to do this one in the last segment, but I went a little long on those two. This one comes from Robbie from Mockcrest. Robbie might live in the Overlook neighborhood. Friend of the program. I don't think Robbie listens to the pod. Robbie's just my friend. Robbie, if you are listening to the pod, thanks for texting me. This is a legitimately very good question. Robbie asks, what backcourt historically in the NBA does the Scoot Shaedon backcourt potentially compare to? I had two ideas. The one that immediately popped into my head was the the Oklahoma City version of the Hornets, the 05-06 Hornets. That it was year 1 Chris Paul and year 2 J.R. Smith in the backcourt. JR didn't play a ton. They didn't end up start a majillion games together because of the JR ended up just like assuming another role, and then he was off the team shortly thereafter. But this reminds me of who they are right now, like rookie Chris Paul, who was a high draft pick. Did the Blazers have a chance to draft Chris Paul? I don't recall. Or did they already have Sebastian Telfair? This franchise has been through a lot. Thanks for listening to the program. But rookie Chris Paul is going to end up being, he's like maybe one of the best players on 4 different franchises, really one of the great, most fascinating careers. Certainly 3 different franchises, excuse me. Like he's an all-time great Hornet. He's an all-time great Clipper. And he's like really one of the great Suns. If you just look at his very brief period and the heights they got to, the all-NBA teams, the finals appearances, like dude is an all-timer. Scoot Henderson might be that. I don't know if he's going to be Chris Paul. It's like arguably one of the 5 or 7 best players that ever play point guard. But Scoot Henderson has a chance to be very, very good. And J.R. Smith was a absolute wild athlete who did not go to college. 6'6", jumped out of the gym, shot threes, did everything you could possibly want to do. He has the Shaedon Sharpe's got a little J.R. Smith in him for sure. You kind of hope that Sharpe has a higher ceiling than JR, but JR played a long time in the league and ended up being like a darn good player on a finals team. that's a good career. I hate to tell everyone, but the J.R. Smith version of the J.R. Smith career is a really good career. I think that's one where they are now historically. The other one I thought of immediately was John Wall and Brad Beal, but Beal's not a great comp for Sharpe because he's just not that. He's like a slithery off ball, kind of like he's just not that type of athlete, right? Like Brad Beal's a pretty good athlete, but he's not like cramming on people highlight dunks. Like his athleticism is like he has great balance and gets to the rim and can score at all three levels and stuff like that. But it's not a perfect one, but that's where my mind went. But then this is the one I settled on. Robbie's the 06-07 We Believe Warriors backcourt with Baron Davis and Jason Richardson. Jason Richardson won a dunk contest. Dude could really shoot it and was a great athlete. And Baron Davis was a big physical guard who wasn't a great shooter, but was a really fun, really good passer. Listener and on YouTube mentioned that Baron Davis is a pretty good comp for Scoot, and that's 100% correct. A great comp for Scoot. They're similar players. Swag, passing flair, really, really serious athleticism. I think Jason Richardson, Baron Davis is your historical comp for Scoot and Sharpe. And as Scoot and Sharpe, if they are able to climb higher and higher, we will update these comps. But for now, that's where they are. Certainly, if we're talking ceilings, like and we believe everyone hits their like 99% ceiling or whatever, then it's like I don't know. It's like something like. It's something like when Dwayne Wade and Kobe were on the Olympic team together or whatever, but it's not. I think that might be a little bit too far out in front. Okay, next question comes from someone else who doesn't listen to the podcast. My friend Lucas, who asks, "Are the Blazers going to have the worst record in the NBA?" Lucas, if you listen to the podcast, I think there's almost no way. Robbie might. I say Robbie's a maybe. Lucas is a definitely not. Someone send this to Lucas. Lucas asks, "Are the Blazers going to have the worst record in the NBA?" Maybe. This is, and Lucas clarified this saying, assuming that Dame is not on the roster, and I think it's a safe assumption. We'll see. It might maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a fair assumption. I think we can move forward with that as being a fair assumption. Maybe, and I don't think that's that bad. I don't think it's that bad, but there's not that many teams in the Western Conference, at least, that aren't like trying to be good. Houston went from being like super duper bad to being, adding Dylan Brooks and adding Fred VanVleet and adding Jeff Green and like shipping out the youngsters and like really committing to trying to be competitive in a hurry, along with their young core. But like they're going to try to be good at least. Teams like Minnesota's not a tank team. They're gonna try to be good. Utah is gonna try to be competitive. We'll kind of see where they end up, but they're not a tank team. They're a team that's trying to build and be good. OKC, like they're just good. Obviously, Phoenix is good. The LA teams are obviously not tanking. Nobody in California is tanking. The Warriors think they can win a championship. The Kings are running it back and adding Nerlens Noel to the core. Like they're not headed in that direction. The Texas teams, like Dallas wants to be good, New Orleans wants to be good, Memphis wants to be good. New Orleans and Memphis famously not in Texas, but they're in the Southwest Conference. But the only other team that's like in that sort of the Blazers range is the San Antonio Spurs, and I think they're going to be decent, but they might be bad. They might be bad just because they might be relatively conservative with how they use Victor Wembanyama. But if he's as good as some of the like prognosticators think he might be, they might like when he plays, they might be darn good. We will see. Like we'll see. The Blazers aren't. Their starting lineup isn't awful, but it's not very good. Scoot, Ant, Matisse Thybulle, Jeremy Grant, and for now Nurk. They don't have a center. They don't have any backup power forwards. Their bench is just brutal. Shaedon Sharpe's good off the bench. Nazir Little has a chance to be an NBA player, but hasn't really been a positive one yet. Jabari Walker is a second-round pick. Chris Murray is a rookie. Keon Johnson is probably not an NBA player. Like Ryan Rupert's not ready. It gets dicey thick. It gets dicey quick. So I think on the other side, Detroit's probably going to be pretty bad. Orlando was good at the end of last season. Everyone else in the East is at least like we'll see what happens with the Hornets. But they have a lot of vets. Like for now, Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward and Bridges, like they got adults. It seems like they'll probably end up bringing PJ Washington back. They got a lot of grown folks, and those guys generally help you win games when they're available. I'm not sure that there's teams. Obviously, there'll be some team that thinks they're good and ends up bad. It might be Houston, but it's obviously like that'll happen. But those teams generally don't end up at the very bottom of the standings. They just end up outside the playoffs. So I think, it's like a pretty. It's not like a safe bet, but it's a pretty reasonable idea that the Blazers might have the worst record in the NBA. And I'm here to tell you right now, in the tail end of July, not tail end, but the third week of July, it's fine. It's fine. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. The LEED certified. They're building this thing sustainably. Get there slowly. There's no rush. Get there slowly, but get there and don't be too patient because then you screw it up. Okay, this next one isn't even a question, but listener Matthew sent in, what in-stadium sound clips do you think will be used for rookies when they score next season? I'm putting my money on Boot Scoot Boogie for Scoot Henderson. Boot Scoot and Boogie, rather. That's just so good. Matthew, I don't have any answers for you. That's just so good. This is a shout out. No, I'm not answering this question. Just Matthew, Boot Scoot and Boogie seems like a lock. That's great. Great stuff, Matthew. Great work. Okay, last question of the show comes from listener Jefferson, who asks, if every NBA team could select prime players from any of their players in history to comprise a tag team pro wrestling match, who would be the 2 all-time Blazers you'd pick? So these are like, you're not picking guys in their current form, right? Like, so if you pick Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it's not like 75-year-old Kareem. It's Kareem in his physical prime in the late 60s. I struggled with this one because my absolute first thought was Maurice Lucas and Brian Grant. 2 enforcers, no nonsense. Less what but. But then I thought about pro wrestling. I'm not a big pro wrestling guy now. I know a lot of people my age still watch pro wrestling, and I think that's great. I think y'all got a good thing going. I'm glad you're watching it. Don't follow it. Can't call it. Couldn't tell you. But I watched some wrestling back in the day. I was into it. I was a middle school boy. I was a middle school boy with Goldberg and The Rock, with NWO, with Sting and old Hulk Hogan wearing black, big sexy Kevin Nash. I was out there. This is my bona fides from 1997. You need flair to wrestle. You need a little personality. You can't have two squares, right? Like Mo Luke, just like no nonsense, and Brian Grant, no nonsense. You need some nonsense. My wrestling tag team needs some nonsense. So I'm bringing the nonsense. Give me Shaed. Ball don't lie. Shaed and Mo Luke. Because you do need an enforcer. We're gonna win this. I'm assuming it's some sort of like battle royale style. You start in the ring and they ring the bell, and they kind of just like the tag teams keep coming out, and the sort of giant 60-person battle royale for all 30 NBA teams. Give me the size and just sort of like truly will fight you in the middle of the NBA Finals, more of Maurice Lucas, and give me the wild, unpredictable, great big brash personality of Shaed, and we're gonna have a really solid wrestling duo. Okay, that is going to do it for this mailbag episode. If you want to submit a question, lockdownblazerspod@gmail.com. But the best way to do that is to listen to the show with regularity and become an everydayer. Commit to the program. Become an everydayer. Listen to the show, and I will solicit questions and respond. Send me an email when I do that, and that is the way you're going to get in the show. Or be like Robbie and Lucas and have played pickup basketball with me tonight. That is a real trick to get in. Okay, lockdownblazerspod@gmail.com is the address. The best way to help grow the show is to tell a friend. So go ahead and do that. We do this every day. Come back for tomorrow's show. I appreciate you listening. Talk to you soon.